Hello and welcome back to Season 2, Episode 118 of Paranormal NL Podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Pocket Cast, and YouTube. I'm your host, Jen. For tonight's, let's give a big shout out to who introduced me to tonight's guest, and that's me. Haha. Yes, let's give a shout out to me. No, that's hilarious. I usually give a shout out to whoever I've got on the show. But you know what? Instead, let's give the USA a shout out to my fellow Americans for their big election debate tomorrow night. Yes, I'm a dual citizen born and raised in Mount Pearl and St. John's, Canada, from Mount Pearl Central and MUN and the GHSN, General Hospital School of Nursing, but I'm also an American citizen. And I traveled nurse for 23 years over on the East Coast in Deep South Texas, USA. But now it's time to grab a nice beverage and pull up a chair and grab a cold one. So listen, yeah, I do have a weird Tex-Mex accent, but now it's time to listen in and tune in to your favorite Paranormal NL podcast, a place where the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, and anywhere else in the world can share their paranormal experiences. PNL Podcast also believes in supporting people, places, and things to promote paranormal tourism and paranormal networking all over the world. A big thank you again to all the PNL Podcast alumni guests from Season 1 and 2, and of course, our fans. We want to hear your stories. Do you have any paranormal, metaphysical, UFO, cryptid creatures, just animals, folklore, historical books, or tales of the weird you'd like to share as a guest on my PNL podcast? Please reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, or Gmail at paranormal.nl.podcast@gmail.com. And after your episode, you'll become part of the PNL Podcast Alumni-Network. And make sure you click on the link and also click a like or click on the bell and subscribe to follow along on whatever platform you're listening in on to get updates for new episodes. Head on over to Facebook and join our group, Paranormal NL Podcast Group. Find upcoming new PNL episodes in the featured section of the group. We're listening to our fans. PNL is now on YouTube and Instagram, and PNL Podcast as a Facebook page for fans who are not on Instagram for Insta Reel Drops, and a spot for the PNL Bog Go Lives. That's right, PNL Podcast has a new branch with the PNL Bog team, a boots on the ground paranormal investigation team doing local historic investigations in Newfoundland. Our fans asked us, Paranormal NL Podcast, for merch, and the new PNL Bog Team merch is now available over on TeePublic. Now let's get on with the show tonight. Enough of the intros, they're boring. Let's bring to the stage Karen Gosse, Director of the Rock Wildlife Rescue here in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. Welcome, Karen.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the show tonight. Now, who do we have in our picture? Who's that?
That is Sunny. He is one of our resident crows that lives on the property and likes to pick up sticks and twigs and flowers and whatever else she can get her hands on and carry them around and hide them and poke them away.
Oh, I love crows. They're a very intelligent creature.
Oh, they're brilliant. Those and ravens. Ravens are my favorite, but crows are certainly a close second.
Now, for the people listening, what's the difference in a raven and a crow?
Well, they're part of the same family, the corvid family. So are blue jays and magpies. But ravens are, if you ever saw them together or in a short time frame, the difference is it's just huge. I mean, a raven is 3 times the size of a crow. It has a different shaped tail. One is a diamond shape and the other is more of a crescent. They have hairy feathers around their legs and around their necks, and their beak is much, much larger. Just the scale of them is much larger. Just for instance, we had a couple of days ago a call from downtown, and somebody called in that it was either an injured massive crow or a raven. And when everybody usually says it's a massive crow, then
that's a raven.
Sends up a flag that it's a raven.
Karen, is there more ravens here in Newfoundland than crows?
No, we have a lot of crows, but we don't see ravens as often because ravens are not as urban as crows are. Crows are they're in our cities. They're in around us all the time. They build nests in our trees, in our yard. I mean, they're just a constant fixture in our cities and towns. Whereas ravens don't dwell as much in the city. They're more on the coast. They're out in the woods. Um, they mate in they stay in pairs. They're not in flocks. So most of the time you wouldn't see a raven. You certainly wouldn't see one down around the ground, downtown or around your workplace or anything like that. We figure this raven must have been coming across. There's a lot of them up on White Hills, and when she came across down by the harbor, she slammed into the Scotiabank glass building.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was awful. She hit one of the highest center and dropped to the pavement. So she's with us right now for rehab.
Okay.
Quite a few injuries, but we think she's going to be okay.
That's great. So she's doing okay even after hitting that and falling?
I don't know how she survived it. I really don't. She fell, 10 stories on concrete after slamming into that glass building. But there were some good people who sort of watched out for her and kept people away from her, and until we could
Right.
get down and get her. So
Yeah.
she's
So,
slowly improving.
Karen, does that happen a lot now with birds banging into windows and buildings? Especially now in downtown, we have so many new, whether it be apartment buildings or hotels, high-rise downtown.
Yeah, we get a lot of window strikes, mostly songbirds, um, because of the reflective glass. Now, this is the first time I've ever heard of a raven slamming into something in the downtown area. Or crows,
Really?
as a rule,
Yeah.
don't really hit a lot of windows either. Most of the time, it's songbirds. We do get birds of prey, hawks and things, hitting windows, chasing a bird, and they see the reflection and think that that's the bird, and hit with their feet out and do quite a bit of damage to themselves.
Karen, on that topic, bird of prey, do we have many birds of prey here? I had, whether it be either a sharp-shinned hawk or something kind of bird of prey fly over my house here in Flat Rock, and I haven't seen any crows here since.
No, and the funny thing is, crows will chase off a bird of prey rather than the opposite. We had one come down here a couple of years ago, and she was taking her pigeons, and the resident crows on the property actually mobbed her and attacked her and drove her off.
Oh,
Crows will actually drive off eagles. They'll drive off ravens. They'll drive off owls. They're very, very territorial, and they work in groups, and they just pester them. They just mob them and pester them. Even though they're larger, stronger, and have bigger weapons, it just, they're more of an annoyance. They swoop at them. Sometimes they grab their wing feathers. I've seen them drive eagles away. Their crows are very effective at what they do. But we do have a lot of birds of prey here. We've got a healthy eagle population. We've got goshawks, which are one of the most aggressive raptors in North America. And we have our osprey and sharp-shinned and merlin. We don't see them a lot in and around the city, but if you live out, I'm in Torbay, you're in Flat Rock, there's quite a few out in this area. They're on the edge of forests, and they don't make themselves well known. But if you ever hear your crows going crazy or the blue jays kicking up a fuss, sometimes if you go out and look on the edge of the forest where you live, you might see one.
now I've seen some aerial battles, and it looked like another crow, or it may have been some sort of other bird of prey.
Maybe a crow usually won't go singularly head to head with a bird of prey. They're usually in groups. That's their
Yeah, there
strength.
was, 2 crows after one other bird, and I don't know, I couldn't tell if it was, it was from a distance. But like you said, they do chase away the other birds of prey. And there's so many things to talk about. Let's talk about you and your facility. Now, we've had some really sad things going on here in St. John's, unfortunately, I wanted you to talk about.
Yeah, we have, and it's happened over the last couple of years. And I say that, but it's probably been happening a lot longer than that. But because we now exist, there's a place to report cruelty. There's a place to bring those animals where before there wasn't. So I don't know if it's relatively new or whether this has been going on for a long time and just gone undetected. But there is a lot of cruelty toward pigeons. Human cruelty. Gulls, we've had a lot of reports this year also about cruelty with gulls, young gulls. And we think that a lot of it stems from the fact that they're labeled pests. It makes people think of them in a different way. It takes away I mean, when you think about a cat or a dog and the emotional connection we have to those, unless we give an animal value, unfortunately, um, a lot of times it disconnects people from them. They don't view
Right,
them
yeah.
the
Because
same
these
way.
birds are very intelligent. I mean, people have been using homing pigeons for years and even seagulls. I mean, they're very intelligent. I know, like you said, people think they're a pest, but and even, our ducks and things. Can you tell us about some of the things that are happening to our wildlife by
Well,
humans?
with pigeons especially, we're finding it in certain areas of the downtown area, especially. They're very targeted areas where people are. Um, it's very aggressive. The damage that these birds sustain is it's heartbreaking, and it's very deliberate. It's not accidental, and we can spot them as soon as they come in because they all present with the exact same types of injuries. So we thought it was tapering off a little bit, and instead, what we've discovered is that we've gotten more vocal about it, and the people who are doing it are now hiding it. So, unfortunately, it's not lessening. It's just we're finding it harder to find these animals while they're still alive. So,
So
there's
what exactly are they doing to them?
well, when we get in these pigeons, they all present with either a keel injury, the big bone that runs down the center of their chest is either broken or extremely bruised, filled with blood. All their tail feathers are plucked out. They usually have one or two broken legs. And they have head trauma from being stomped on or kicked. It's awful. It's awful what these birds go through, and they're so trusting because most people feed them. And pigeons were domesticated by us long, long time ago. And we use them in the war. We use them for messages. We use them for actually finding people lost at sea because they could detect the orange color of life vests. Uh,
Oh,
before we had those navigation systems, they would strap pigeons in a very small capsule underneath these helicopters and take the birds up. And they would, as soon as they would see an orange vest, they would peck and get a pellet of food. Is how they trained them. So
oh
these
wow.
birds
I
were
didn't know that.
extremely, yeah. There's some news articles. From back when they used to use them in the studies that were done, they were very effective. It wasn't until modern technology made it a little bit easier instead of training them. But once we decided that there was easier ways for us to get messages in and out of places and to detect people in search and rescue issues, the pigeon became you know negligible to us. And then by that time they had been lost or stranded in cities and set up populations. And from their perspective, our buildings along these coastlines very much resemble the rocky cliffs where they come from naturally. So it was just a natural progression for them, and now they depend on us.
Right,
They're
yeah, you don't see them much out in
yeah,
the woods or anything. It's always in the city for the
yeah.
pigeons.
No, they became domesticated years and years and years ago, and now, of course, they're deemed pests because of the larger
And
flocks.
there's been some other instances of oil or something that I read from
Yeah, we're still
restaurants or
finding them in the restaurant areas of Water Street and Duckworth Street. Some restaurants are leaving open vats of the old cooking oil that is no longer usable. They're not covering it properly, and some of the pigeons are falling into that. And then, which in the summertime, sometimes they survive, but in the fall and winter, when it gets cold, that compromises their waterproofing. So the water doesn't bead off them like you see. And when it's raining, it will soak through to their bodies and they get hypothermic and they just
do you
can't survive.
ever see that in the residences? 'Cause, in the neighborhoods, I know a lot of people will put, like, if they're cooking, they'll put the oil out on their step or something because it's cold and it'll solidify faster and then throw it in the garbage, but have you seen any accidents with that? Should people not be doing that or
We haven't, well, I mean, it's not a good idea, but for the most part, the amount of time that it's out there, it's not something that's going to cause a lot of problems. Cover it is what we say to people. Just even if it's ceramic, even if anything like a little metal lid, just cover it over because anything can get into it. The smell of it, even if you don't want, you know, rats or mice or anything around, they're very attracted to that kind of thing. So it's just not a good idea. And really, it's when you go by the city bylaws, it's not allowed to be left open like that for a host of different reasons. So protecting wildlife is certainly one of them.
and
Um,
how about our ducks? I know there's a lot of tourists here in Newfoundland and Labrador. They like to go and, feed ducks, and unfortunately, a lot of people think, "Let's bring a bag of bread." But can you talk a little bit about that?
and it's not that bread per se is bad for a duck. The problem is that the bread fills the duck up with a a calorie that's not nutritional. They don't get anything from it. It's an empty calorie. So then they don't eat what they need to eat, which are the greens in the pond, the plant matter, the little invertebrates and things that ducks eat, or even seed. So we say to people, if you want to feed the ducks, you can get bird seed, or you can go to the country co-op out on Topsail Road, and they have duck pellets that you can feed ducks. So that if you enjoy doing that sort of thing, you can do it. It's just, don't feed them the things that are going to make them unhealthy and fill them up with empty calories. It's sort of like giving your kid Oreos before you give them supper and wondering why they're not eating.
Is cracked corn good too for the ducks, or?
It is good for them, but not on its own.
Okay. You
So
gotta have
it's,
a mixture.
yeah, it's a healthier mixture. I mean, they do love cracked corn, but they can't survive on cracked corn alone. The nutritional value is just not, it's not high enough. Like anything, there is no creature that actually lives on one thing alone. Here at rehab, when we bring in animals that have to stay with us, especially for a lengthy period of time, we don't even just feed seed to a pigeon. They get little bits of broccoli and egg and minced things like that can give them the same type of nutrients that they would find on their own, but don't have access to when they're here in an enclosure. So we have to make sure that we're meeting all their nutritional needs when
And
they're.
how about the crows? What do you give them to eat? I know they're mostly meat eaters. Is that right?
Well, crows are omnivores. They have a really wide range that they eat. Ravens are a little more protein, but crows will eat anything we eat, basically. We just keep them away from um, sweet salt and sugars. We keep them away from anything processed and dairy products. It's not something they would come across naturally in the wild, but they would eat any fruits, any vegetables, meats. We feed, sometimes we also cat kibble and dog kibble because it has a really complete calorie count for them with a lot of different nutrients and vitamins that they can get quickly. We just can't, strangely enough, avocado is poisonous to most birds. So
Avocado. Okay, that's good to
avocado,
know. Yeah, don't put avocado up for your
no,
birds.
don't put
Now, is
avocado
it
out.
it's interesting that we're talking about that because I know the crows would, when we had a dog when I was growing up, would take turns and kind of tease the dog and pull her away one way, and then the other crow would go in and get some of the kibble.
Yes, they love dog kibble. They love peanuts. I mean,
Yeah.
peanuts are just the crows. I mean, be all end all for a crow. And ravens are the same way. But ravens love fish. So when we have ravens in, we feed them capelin and cod and things like that, along with the other foods they eat. But they live very close to the water most of the time. Ravens do. So fish is a big part of their diet.
So should people be worried about their little cats or dogs that they leave out on the patio with birds of prey around?
No, I mean, it's It's one in a million. And you would have to have that little dog or cat out for hours and hours and hours unsupervised by itself. Most of our birds of prey are very specific when it comes to diet and what they hunt. The ospreys stick to fish. The eagles love gulls, and they eat a lot of gulls.
Seagulls?
Yeah, they eat a lot of gulls. Yeah,
And we do have a large eagle population here. I know that even in the pond next to us, we saw an eagle one year.
yeah, a lot up in the White Hills area by Robin Hood Bay. There's a lot of eagles up that way, for obvious reasons. But you'll
Kitty
see,
Bitty too, right?
yeah, you'll see them at Kitty Bitty, and they are hunting gulls because they're big and they make a good meal, and there's a lot of them. So
But they don't go
blue
after
jay,
the ducks, right? Do they? Or
I imagine they do, but all we've ever seen is them. They target pigeons and gulls a lot.
okay, because I know a lot of people, local people, have like ducks and chickens around their house sometimes, at around the bay, shall we say?
Yeah, and they do, and even like out around Flat Rock and Torbay out where we are. But for the most part, there's so much natural prey in Newfoundland. I mean, our hare population is huge.
Yes, we have a lot of rabbits.
Lots and lots, and rats and mice and birds. I mean, goshawks hunt a lot of birds, so we have a lot of prey.
So is it true if you got crows, then you won't have rats because they're eating all that kind of stuff?
Well, not necessarily, because crows will not take on a huge rat, and some of our rats are really, really big. They will eat mice. They drive away a lot of different things, but really the best thing for rats are owls and foxes.
Oh,
They get rid
foxes
of
eat the rats? Okay.
fox, get rid of rats very, very quickly.
Okay, yeah. What would do you say about the Signal Hill foxes? I haven't seen them around in a while.
Well, the biggest family up there was relocated. I believe it was a year and a half ago, somewhere around there, almost 2 years ago,
Yeah.
because people had habituated them so much. And there's a big difference between imprinting and habituation. And these foxes were just so used to seeing humans as a food source that they would walk right up to cars. They would walk up to people, which is
Yeah, yeah.
dangerous.
Actually, here in Flat Rock, we were unloading groceries one day and we had two foxes approach us because we had a bag full of meat. And I was like,
Hmm.
should I drop the meat bag and give it to them? Or and
And
they
it's not a natural behavior. So it's
no.
definitely taught.
Yeah, and I was, like, walking into the house, and they were between the door and the car, so I was like, what do I do?" So I just kinda treated it like a dog and just kept walking and kind of ignored it, and it went around the other way, and it was fine because I don't worry about foxes so much as coyotes. I know we've had a lot of coyotes in the area too. What do you say about those guys?
There are, and there have been for years. People just never really realized it. But
Yeah,
coyotes are they're so skittish.
yeah.
I used to walk with my German Shepherd all the time up on the trails down in Flat Rock, and we would see coyotes, and they'd always stay 100 feet ahead of you, looking back over their shoulder. They don't want anything to do with us.
Yeah.
They stay away from us. Most of the time we have conflict is when we're building new subdivisions and things like that and encroaching on their habitats, or
Right, I
they're
think that's
injured.
definitely what's happening, for
Yeah.
sure.
Or sometimes you'll see one injured. We've had a couple of reports of one limping, and then they're finding it harder to hunt. So they'll sort of come a little closer looking for garbage, scavenging, that sort of thing. But again, the chances of a coyote going anywhere near your pets or yeah, it's just not a likely scenario. It's not
So they're
something,
not really a pack hunter, they're more of a loner.
not at all. They're
Mm.
not wolves. They're most of the time you see them sort of on their own. And again, there's such a huge
How
amount
about
of
the
prey.
coy wolf thing or the idea of having wolves here in Newfoundland and Labrador? Because I have heard stories of people say, "Oh, I had this puppy and brought it to the vet and somewhere else, and then later they checked the blood, and then they asked, I think it was a blood sample or something they checked, but it was actually a wolf, so they had to take it because it was actually a crossbreed with a wolf."
I haven't heard of a dog crossbred with a wolf here. Any reports of them? I have, and the province has records of coyote and wolf crosses. Uh,
Coyote wolf. Okay.
yeah, that's a much more likely scenario because our dogs don't we don't have a lot of stray. Well, where there are none really in Newfoundland. You can't even get a adopt a puppy anymore. Shelters are just not. There's not a lot of dogs unless you're looking
Right.
for a
Puppies
senior.
are hard to get, yeah.
Yeah, we
How
do
about
not
in
have a dog
Labrador,
problem.
though, Karen? Have you heard any reports in Labrador of that kind of stuff going on?
There's a lot that, well, I mean, Labrador is a whole different scene. I mean, there's a lot of
Mm.
stray dogs, a lot of husky lab mixes, street dogs, that sort of thing. That's where you would probably get much more, if any of that kind of crossing over. But we used to have the Newfoundland wolf here years ago, and it was extinct, hunted to extinction. And now they do come over. There's been lots of sightings of them, but there is a bounty on them.
Oh,
Anybody who sees one and wants to shoot one and submit its pelt, they get a certain amount of money for it because they don't want wolves to populate Newfoundland again because of the caribou. So we all have an opinion on either side of that. To me, I think wolves were always here, and they will end up repopulating again. There's no way you can control nature, no matter how much we think we can. We can't.
had the rehab, do you ever get any large breed animal, like, caribou, or we don't see much of that in town, but, have you ever had anybody try to bring one in from another part of the province, like larger animals?
We've had calls on them, but we are only permitted for small mammals and birds. So we can't take the coyotes or moose or those types of animals. Um, the
Yeah,
province
tell us more
itself.
about the Rock Wildlife Rescue, what you particularly bring in, and how people, if they see an animal, what do they do, and what kind of animal?
We do a lot of birds, a lot of seabirds, crows, ravens, songbirds, hares. We're permitted for beavers, and we just had a muskrat come in that was hit by
Oh,
are.
Oh no.
Yeah, big guy. He's not doing so well.
Right.
Yeah, and we have squirrels that come in, red squirrels that come in, chipmunks that come in, lots of those animals. So basically, people call us, and what we always say is call us anyway, because even if we can't take that animal, if we're not permitted to, we can certainly guide you in the right direction as to who is.
So your permit is for wild animals, not domesticated ones.
Yes, we cannot take domestic animals. So sometimes people get a little upset because there's a rooster. People dump roosters all the time in Newfoundland, unfortunately, or domestic ducks, or those. We don't get a lot of cat and dog calls. We get a few, but we can't take domestic animals because we are not a sanctuary. We are a rescue, rehabilitation, and release center. So our goal is to release. So if we took a domestic goose or a duck or something like that, that wasn't flighted like certain species of domestic duck are, or roosters, there would be nowhere to release them. There would be nowhere we could keep them. So we're a very small facility, so we don't have that kind of space. So if we took a domestic animal, number one, we're not allowed because you can't mix domestics with wildlife for disease control. I mean, that's a big part of what we do is we're very careful about viruses that exist in wildlife.
That's another thing. Yeah, there's a lot of signs around about the bird flu and not to feed the ducks because of the bird flu and things like that. Do you still give a warning to the public on feeding birds around their house or?
Well, it's still here. Avian influenza is endemic now. It will always be here in small little pockets. Ducks can carry it asymptomatically. So that's the problem with ducks is that they can carry it and spread it, but they don't show it. Whereas gulls die very quickly. Crows, the same thing. Most of the seabirds can't handle that virus.
Okay.
Different birds react differently. The highly pathogenic label comes from how it affects poultry. So the ducks, it's not highly pathogenic to the ducks. But as a rule, when you're getting a large amount of birds to congregate in one area, it's not natural. So it's a very easy reservoir to spread those kinds of diseases. So that's why one of the when those signs went up, it was in the height of HPAI when we did not want those ducks congregating in really big areas in big groups because it's a prime reservoir for that kind of thing.
Right.
And people didn't understand it. They thought, okay, the ducks were going to starve.
I still hear people saying, though, Karen, not to feed the birds during the summer, only feed them in the winter.
That's
because
true.
scavenging is more difficult in the winter for the wild animal.
Well, it's the summer feeders is more of an issue of trichomoniasis, it's called. People call it canker or flounce. It's a disease that comes in bird feeders. We've had quite a lot of it in the last couple of weeks. And it infects a bird so that they get these big, almost like cottage cheese things forming in their throat and in their digestive system, and it clogs up their mouth and throat and nasal passages. So when they try to eat, they can't swallow, and they end up regurgitating that seed, and then the next bird picks it up, and it's very contagious. So they end up starving to death. It's an awful way to die. So we've had quite a few cases, and it thrives in moist, warm environments, which is the kind of summer we've had. So in the summer, there's huge food sources for all of our songbirds that are here. So we think, for the feeders in the summer, it's really not necessary. We want to see the birds, we want to see them up close, so we put out the feeders. But as a rule, we try to deter people in the summer, but it's because of that disease and the fact that people don't disinfect their bird feeders, on a weekly basis or even more frequently. And that disease is awful. We have medications for it and can help them if they get into us in time. But most of the time, by the time they're symptomatic, it's already spread through whatever birds are at that feeder.
Okay. So in the winter, you don't have that as much because of obviously it's colder and.
Exactly. And we don't have as many species because a lot of our species, your songbirds, are migratory, so they leave in the fall. So
Right.
you've got, some chickadees and juncos and, your fall winter birds that stay here over the winter. And the feeder, they're more ground feeders. They more, hop along the ground and get food rather than come to the feeders in your trees and things. So it's less likely. And the disease itself, it's a fungal infection. It doesn't survive as well in winter. So it's much lower risk.
So I guess I'll ask a quick question about cryptid creatures before we peace out. What do you think about cryptid creatures here in Newfoundland and Labrador? Cryptid as in creatures you don't usually see. I know cryptid, a lot of people think about Bigfoot. A lot of people think mostly about creatures who don't inhabit the province, usually like cougars or, different things like that.
What do I think that when our generational outdoorsmen all report seeing the same things in different areas individually who don't know each other, I think that those are people we should listen to. We're an island, yes, but there's ice floes. There's people who have brought in big cats years ago. Do I believe there's, cougars and other large cats here? I do. I have not seen them myself, but
Well, they're very elusive creatures.
they are. And you're not going to often see them. But the more we kind of encroach on their habitat, the more we reach into the wild in Newfoundland where we haven't been before. That's when we stumble across those things. And these are the people, our outdoors people who are out in these areas who've spent a lifetime, hunting and fishing in these remote areas. When they see these things, I don't think we can just discount those. I think, we should listen and
yeah, I think our wildlife definitely is unfortunately beginning to meet humans more. Even a few years since we've moved in here, there's at least 5 or 6 new houses, even on our street, and less woods for them to feed in and live in. So we're going to see a lot more coming in around your house and stuff. So don't be alarmed. They're living amongst us, even though you don't know it. They're urban. They're getting used to us. Right, Karen?
They are here, and some people say, well, we shouldn't be interfering with wildlife, or rehab is not necessary. It shouldn't exist. Wildlife is nature. 99% of the animals we take come from an altercation at the human-animal interface. It's our interference. It's our buildings, our cars, poisoning, all of the things that we do. That's the animals that we get in. We get very few animals that are hurt by other animals. Most of our animals come in because of humans. So we owe it back to them to try to mitigate some of that damage.
So, Karen, what can people do if they come across a wild animal and they think that you can help them? Where are you located? How can people reach out to you?
We say call or text at 709-727-3101. If we don't answer right away, it's because we're dealing with an emergency or feeding animals, and we are a small group, so sometimes we can't get there right away. You can send us a message on Facebook, but I always say you're better texting and phoning, because sometimes if we're too busy, we can't monitor all different avenues of social media. And we're at 110 Quigley's Lane. We ask that you call us first, just because we need to know if an animal is coming in to prepare for that animal, to let you know whether we have room for that animal and can take that animal, and to make sure there's a volunteer in the intake building.
And Quigley's Lane is in Torbay in Newfoundland.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us about your website so people can see and find you.
We have a website at www.therockwildliferescue.com. We are on Facebook and on Instagram. And a lot of what you see there, you'll see the animals that we have here at the rescue. Some of the things that we do. Sometimes we will put out fundraising because we are run solely by donations.
And how can people help you with donations? What are you looking for right now at the Rock Wildlife Rescue on Quigley's Lane and Torbay, Newfoundland?
Monetary donations are always wonderful because we can pool those to get larger things that we need. But we always use dog food, cat food, bird seed, puppy pads, cleaning supplies, lumber and hardware supplies, all of those types of things, because we are constantly repairing or upgrading enclosures, and we've got to change the bedding for those animals. We have medication and vet bills for those animals. We do all of our work through Avalon, who are amazing. Avalon Animal Hospital.
I love Avalon Animal Hospital. I had to bring a urine sample there tomorrow for my kitty cat.
Oh, they're fabulous. And my daughter actually works there too. And
wow.
And they're a wonderful group of people. They love wildlife, and they go over and above for us.
Big shout out to the
we couldn't function without them. Yeah, we definitely would be here.
Yeah, they're located on Torbay Road also, and you can shout out their name again, Karen, to give them a big shout out.
That's Avalon Animal Hospital. They're on Logie Bay Road. Yep, and they're wonderful people.
So everybody follow them and follow the Rock Wildlife Rescue. Again, they're located on Quigley's Lane over in Torbay, Newfoundland, Canada. And thank you so much, Karen, for being on the show today and telling everybody about our awesome wildlife here, how we can help them, and how humans, need to stop hurting the wildlife, please.
Please.
All right, Karen. Well, thanks so much for being on the show today. We really enjoyed having you on.
Thank you so much for helping us spread the word.
Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, and we're going to jump on a quick wrap up.